Hi, everybody. So it's been a while. Um, if I could say that I learned anything about life in 2020, it's that I'm not good at managing my YouTube account. So um, this is probably going to be a newer video that I won't follow up much with, but I just had some things that I wanted to cover, and it's been a while. Yeah. Some things that I wanted to talk about, and I apologize if I keep looking down. I have notes on my phone. Um, but some things that I wanted to talk about um, are I see a lot of times rad femmes in particular talking about uh, discrimination against trans people, transphobia. What does it mean? What is it? Um, and who is experiencing actual discrimination versus perceived discrimination? And there is a difference, right? Like we can walk through the world being hyper aware and um, on edge, and might perceive things in a more aggressive way because we are in that mindset, versus someone who maybe has more self confidence, who approaches the world in a way of um, human acceptance, and they may perceive less adversity. That's not to say that things don't actually happen, and that's part of what I want to address. So, when I identified as transgender, was very much one of those people who perceived discrimination and threats all the time. Now, some of that is due to the trans community sort of encouraging that mindset, right? When you get into this bubble of like minded people and one person says that they feel threatened in their life, you're going to see what they're going through and find the parallels in your own life. And this happens in any community to any extent. And it doesn't just happen in regard to discrimination or adversity, but that is something that is very common in the trans community, where you sort of almost compete with your lived experience of adversity and discrimination. I was in the throes of that, but I also take responsibility on my own part in terms of I have extreme paranoia, diagnosable paranoia. So there are many times where I perceive a threat and there is no real life evidence that that is actually a dangerous situation. And this happens mostly outside of the home, but it can happen anywhere, and it can happen with loved ones, people I know, people I don't know. It can happen with men or women, though it does tend to happen more with men. And so I have this sort of um, misguided perception of the world anyway. So I want to acknowledge that I think while I was fueled by the encouragement of um, the belief in the trans community that you constantly have a target on your back. While that did, sort of encourage my perception, I also have this very what's the word? In, I guess I have this impressionable mind that um, anything that could be dangerous is dangerous. Even if in a very unrealistic small percentage of a chance that something is dangerous, my mind will instantly go to that instead of the reality. I want to, bring that to light that um, there is this anxious feeling in a lot of people where, especially during these times, there's so much uncertainty. And when you have uncertainty in your life, you are more likely to look at it as a possibility for danger than as a possibility for growth. And I think some of that is human nature. Some of that is the community that we take part in, and some of that is our own psychological standard, right? So, that being said, I want to address that um, I personally believe that transphobia is a real thing. Um, I haven't really encountered anyone who says that transphobia isn't real, but there are semantics involved um, as far as those conversations go. Some people believe certain things are transphobia, and others feel that those things are not transphobic. So I want to highlight something. I personally did actually experience what I believe to be transphobia. Um, and that's something that a lot of detransitioners, I don't think, really talk about very much. Um, in that, um, we tend to look at things from our past and look at the ways that we were wrong and the ways that we were wronged and the ways that we were misled to believe certain things and live our lives with that belief as a paramount structure of how we view the world. And I think that that's important. I think it's very important for detransitioners to be able to look back and see the ways that they had undue influence put upon them so that they were living an untruthful life or, I hate this word, an inauthentic life. We were living for reasons that were not our true priorities. They were not, in our best, um, in light of our best outcome, right? We were kind of living our lives for the narrative versus living our lives for ourselves. So I do understand that, and I agree that a lot of times when people say that there's been transphobia, what they really mean is that they are in a perceived field of danger, and that's different. Feeling that you are in danger is different than being in danger, and it's really hard to determine that difference sometimes. Like I said, I have very severe paranoia and issues around that. And I understand firsthand that it's very difficult to navigate in real time a situation when you're perceiving it as dangerous and try to find the markers that indicate that it's not. Um, because the threat or the perceived threat of danger feels so real and it feels so immediate that it's right there in your face, and it takes time to realize the reality of safety and the reality of how this situation may not be as bad as you think it is. But I want to tell you, um, so while I identified as transgender, I looked very much like a young man or, like a teenage boy. Um, and I, for one, was one of those folks who, I'm embarrassed to say, I kind of ascribe to nonconformity in in a very uh, loud way. So I would often wear makeup and jewelry. So I looked sort of like this combination of teenage boy plus effeminate, you know, dress. And my mannerisms and the way that I speak obviously contributed to that kind of ambiguous, male or female confusion. So a lot of what came out of that um, was confusion led by frustration. Um, and I encountered many times where almost exclusively men would grab me. I was sexually assaulted on the grounds of, are you male or female? Let me check, kind of thing. Um, and I also was followed, harassed. People would either call me derogatory names that reference gay men, or they would just refer to me as, a queer. Um, so these things kind of followed me around a bit. It wasn't prevalent in my personal life, though. I didn't face any difficulty with family, really. My friends were all completely on board. Um, I didn't lose any friends when I came out as transgender. In fact, I gained lots of friends. Um, and everyone changed pronouns and changed my name very quickly. So in my personal life, those things were very stable, but in my public life, things were a little bit more hostile. One instance in particular was I was at an airport, and at the time, I had legally changed my name on my identification card, but it was not fully changed on my passport. I had the paperwork showing that the process had been started, but government things like that take a long time. So I brought the paperwork with me to show, because at the time I needed my passport. So I brought it along to show them, hey, the name change for my passport is in process, but it hasn't been completed. Here's the old version. Here's the paperwork. Here's my ID. All of that. So that kind of like flagged them that they need to check me out a little bit more, right? Because things are not, my identification was not consistent. So they pulled me to the side, and I had maintained my sex marker. I never had any intention of changing my sex marker. I had a concern that if I were to change my sex marker from female to male, that might prove to cause difficulty in seeing a gynecologist and getting female specific healthcare. So I kept my female gender marker, but I also had a very masculine name. So they pull me aside and they're checking all my paperwork and stuff. They check my ticket. And then they say that they have to do a body search. And I know that there are plenty of people out there who've gone through body searches who have had terrible, terrible encounters, and it's not specific to them presenting in a certain way. Sometimes it's a power grab, sometimes it's miscommunication, all these things, it could be a number of different things. But so they wanted to do a body search, and they asked me, to come over to this tent. Well, I should back up. At first, they asked me, okay, like, come over here and we'll do it. And I said, I would like some privacy. And they said, fine, we'll go over to this tent. We went over to the tent, and two male guards were there. And I saw they were getting ready, and I said, actually, I prefer female to search me. I said, I'm biologically female. And the male guards laughed at me, and they said, we don't have to provide you with a female guard. If that's what you really want, we'll see if anyone can help. And they, again, this is my perception, so I don't know what their actual intent was, but they popped their head outside of the tent, looked around, said, nope, no female guards available. Sorry, you're out of luck. And they started to check my body. Now, as they did this, they were consistently laughing at me and making fun of the way I dressed. And the one male guard who was actually like checking my body, the other was like going through my bag and my carry-on, and was like checking my paperwork. And so the guard who was checking my body very aggressively grabbed my genitals and started laughing at me, saying I had no dick. And the whole time I'm there, and for one, I'm very humiliated. For two, I feel very violated. But for three, I'm also thinking, well, no shit, Sherlock. I just told you I'm female. So they continued to laugh at me and poke fun at me, and eventually they let me go. But it was well, mean, it's been a long time since that happened, so it's not really it doesn't really affect me now, but at the time it was pretty traumatic, you know? Um, and so I wanna say, people who present different ways, depending on their environment, they can encounter a lot of abuse and harassment. And um, I think it's important to understand that, yes, when a lesbian says she doesn't want to sleep with a trans woman because she's a lesbian and she only sleeps with women, um, saying that she's transphobic, that's incorrect. That's not transphobia. But there are instances where transphobia does happen, even here in the United States, and even in metropolitan areas. At the time, I was in a very large city at a very large airport. So, these things can happen anywhere. Um, and I do think it's important to recognize that, um, the trans people who are walking out in the world who are um, they're trying to just live their lives and they're trying to um, conform enough in a way to be left alone, they still struggle. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that as people who are, radical feminists or, gender non-conforming people ourselves, like, um, we may find opposition with trans people in certain situations, but that's one thing that I want to take a stand on a little bit is that, um, there are trans people out there who really do encounter these struggles, and um, it's important to recognize that and, um, you know, try to make their lives a little bit easier in certain circumstances. So that's my take on that. Um, you can, obviously comment. I don't read the comments on YouTube very much because I can't psychologically handle it or something. So, if you want, you can leave a comment here, or you can head on over to Twitter. You can comment there or message me on Twitter if you want to talk more about that. Um, it's just something I felt the need to say because I see it so frequently in the rad femme community where transphobia, and I understand why, but transphobia as a term gets shrugged off as meaningless. And unfortunately, it has kind of become meaningless because of overuse. And the definition has been stretched so much that a lot of times we don't really know what we're talking about. Um, but yeah, it's something I kind of wanted to make more clear, I guess, at least for my own personal stance. I encourage people to think about it and um, talk about it, and maybe we can bring back the definition. That would be great because there are people who actually encounter issues, and it would be really nice to be able to recognize those issues and not have it conflated with something that's now been exaggerated. So that's one topic that I wanted to touch on. Um, I guess another topic that I wanted to talk about was medicalization. So, anybody who follows me on Twitter has probably picked up that I focus a lot on um, hormones and puberty blockers and the process of how those things affect our bodies. I have a lot of passion for learning more about how our bodies work in general because, oh my God, like some of the stuff that our bodies can do is mind blowing. It's amazing. And figuring out, okay, what if, we're introducing this foreign thing? What's going to change? Um, and before anybody says anything, I understand the prospect that both men and women produce both testosterone and estrogen, and that having the presence of those hormones is not in and of itself a foreign thing. However, we also need to admit the fact that when you are taking cross sex hormones, you are taking a synthesized version. So it's not in its natural state, and it's not in its natural amount, and it's not being produced by a natural metabolism, a natural system within your body. So when I say it's foreign, that it's something that we have taken from outside of our bodies, that has been synthesized and produced to replicate something that's natural but is not in and of itself entirely natural. So, just making that statement. So I wanted to talk about something I picked up on over the last like week or two, and it's something that actually has been on my mind since I even identified as trans. So when I started transition, um, my doctor and I had a conversation, and she told me that I would likely have to continuously increase my dose of testosterone um, to fight the conversion of testosterone into estrogen. Now, um, I am in the process of trying to figure out, is that true? Is that something that can happen? Because if it is, there's a couple of things related to that that I think should be of concern to trans people. So you have your baseline of estrogen and you have your baseline of testosterone in a female body, and you start taking cross-sex hormones, you start taking testosterone, and the way that it metabolizes in your system, though, it goes through a change where if it's not um, linked enough in a certain way to fat, um, if it, I believe this is correct. So if I'm wrong, I really apologize. I'm still in the middle of research. But I believe if it's linked to fat in a certain way, it can be changed to estrogen. Now, the thing is, how do I put this? Um, Dealing with weight and fatty tissue when you are transgender and taking cross-sex hormones is kind of a difficult balance. You're dealing with a metabolism that's changing, um, and your eating habits are different, and likely your exercise and just daily activities have changed because of, you've got more energy, so why not be more active, right? Um, but there are some people, I think, who fall into a state of, um, you know, uh, becoming more athletic, um, becoming more focused on muscle development, and maybe their eating habits change too. And then there are people who they may struggle with um, the encouragement you get from your body to eat more when you're on testosterone and gaining fat. And I'm not making any statement about one is better than the other. But I do wonder if people who struggle with retaining fat while they're on cross-sex hormones, if they also struggle with converting with the conversion of testosterone to estrogen. So that's one thing that I think should be taken into account is, we've got people of all different sizes and different eating habits and daily habits and things. And so it's not across the board what's going to happen, right? One other thing is that in this process, I am trying to find information on this. So far, I have not found any information or research done on this specific thing. So take this with a grain of salt. But I have a theory that for some people who are given high doses of testosterone, because a higher dose means like a higher amount of testosterone means that it's actually more likely that testosterone is going to start being converted. But I'm wondering if people who are given a high dose of testosterone are then more likely to convert that testosterone into estrogen and then have a certain disease like endometriosis or adenomyosis initiated, because those two things have been seen to well, I'm not 100% on adenomyosis, so maybe I'm wrong about that, but endometriosis is initiated by estrogen. It feeds off of estrogen. Your body, your white blood cells essentially attack this over this production of estrogen, um, and kind of goes crazy. So again, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a scientist, so I'm just trying to relate to you some of the like how I've gone through the process of this research and trying to figure things out for myself. So I'm curious though if, like I said, if a higher production of testosterone then it initiates conversion into estrogen, which then initiates endometriosis. I haven't yet met anyone who has gone on cross sex hormones and also suffered endometriosis. So this theory doesn't have a lot of support. I acknowledge that. However, I'm still curious. I'm still interested in learning more and figuring out if this is something that at least could happen, even if it's very unlikely and hasn't happened. And even if it's not happened to me, if my endo is completely unrelated to taking testosterone, that's fine. I have resolved a lot of those issues. So that's not really, while I definitely have a stake in this, my priority is not confirmation bias. It's not being able to pinpoint a reason for myself. My drive is because I feel like it's something that's not really been researched, and I think that it should be. You know, um, there are people who, at least according to many doctors, um, there could be a predisposition to having endometriosis. There could be a genetic link to it. Um, Heads are kind of butting on that issue, so it's not a confirmed thing, but by some of the leading doctors in the endometriosis field, it is believed that there's at least a small genetic link. So it would be interesting to know if that's something that they can test for and warn people about before they go on testosterone, if, again, this theory is true. So that's something that I'm looking into. If you have resources going one way or the other, like I said, I'm not in this for confirmation bias. If you can prove me wrong, please. Give me more information. I would love to know more about this and if there's been research studies on it. Right now, PubMed is my best friend and just struggling through research. Most of it's been done on postmenopausal women and men. But then there are also some studies on animals that I'm looking into. Unfortunately, um, there's not a lot of research done on female to male transsexuals. Um, and that is, I think, going to be detrimental to how this all turns out, right? Like, we're not putting in the research, we're not putting in the work to find out what these things actually do, but we're already releasing these drugs. We're already releasing this medical intervention without knowing very much about it. So it concerns me, and it doesn't concern me in the way that I want to stop the production altogether or that I don't want trans people who are on hormones to stop getting their hormones. Um, but I worry about them, and I've been told I'm very condescending because of my perspective on this. So I apologize if I am, but um, I just feel like, I look back and I wish I had had more information available to me. And I wish that um, doctors had been more open about negative side effects, not to discourage me, but to be truthful. Because, for some people, hormones work great and it's something that they can manage long term, and it is something that really does help them with their struggles. Um, but, then there's the, the people like me who are kind of a fluke because there's no research. So we're just kind of out here like, hey, so I don't know about any studies being done, but this laundry list of issues happened for me. And I'm wondering what the links are and if it could have been prevented had we known more or had my doctor been more open and truthful with me. Because, in terms of care, even if a minority of people are being harmed from side effects and things like that, it still needs to be taken into consideration. Now, it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't mean that we need to take all the hormones away from them, but it needs to be considered. And I feel like there is this level of dissonance in the trans community as a whole where they want it now, they don't care about the consequences, they want it now. And I get it, I was there. um Again, I'm sorry if I'm being condescending, but like, I was right there. I believed all of that. I thought if I didn't get this testosterone that I was being told was going to help me, that I would end up killing myself, and those were the only options. And I believed it very strongly on my own, and also because of encouragement from the people around me that, that's the way it works, is you get these drugs or you kill yourself. And there are alternatives. There, you can survive. If you survive this long without hormones, you can survive a little longer just to get your blood work done and just to get the proper information. It's not that now that you have the information, there's a ticking clock, you know? Um, but I get the impatience. I do. You find this thing that's, been produced to essentially fix whatever issues you're having, and you feel like it's really going to help you, and that nothing else has. And for a lot of people who choose cross sex hormones, they're struggling with a lot of long term mental health issues. Um, and when you go through that your whole life, it wears on you. It doesn't get easier necessarily. You can develop better coping mechanisms and you can learn how to work with the tools you have a little bit better over time. But the issue itself doesn't just, fade away over time. It's still going to be with you, and it's still going to be breaking you down day after day. So when you find something that promises immediate closure to those issues, I get it. Why wouldn't you want something like that? Um, but we need to slow down. We really need to slow down, because right now we're essentially saying fuck all to long term effects and fuck all to possible side effects and possible, um, you know, relations to cancers and organ failure and all these things, because the immediacy is pushed so hard. We're saying, well, this will keep them alive, so let's get them on it. But we're not looking at, okay, but is it? Is it really going to keep them alive if it causes their thyroid to malfunction? If it causes an increase in prostate cancer, is it really going to keep them alive if the side effects and the long term effects could possibly mean a life changing event or possibly death? We're not really looking at the big picture here. And it's really frustrating to me, because I want people who need hormones to have access to hormones. Sincerely, I want people who have tried everything and feel like this is the next thing that they need to try. I want them to have that as an option, but not at the risk of them dying, and not at the risk of them going into it without proper information. And that's not, the onus is not really on them. Why do they have to hold the burden of figuring out all this stuff? The onus, I think, is on the doctors and on scientists and the pharmaceutical companies. They need to be putting this research out there and making it available to patients. And it's really not. You can kind of do your own Google searches and everything, but the information's not super readily available. And we definitely don't have statistical information to prove or disprove certain things. And it's just a crapshoot. And so I'm kind of ranting right now. But yeah, that's kind of where my passion lies, is, you know, for people who need cross sex hormones, they also need comprehensive care and they need honesty. And we are deciding to make invisible the facts because they might discourage people from going down this path. And it makes me wonder, why are we so worried about discouraging people from going down a path that might cause them issues? If they are more likely to encounter issues and they decide not to go down the path of cross sex hormones, why is that a bad thing? You know, who's saying that it's a bad thing? Well, I don't know. I I look at the trans community and I look at the media throughout it, and it's all very, affirmative care, and this is the only way, and if you don't do this, you'll die. And so if somebody says, well, I looked into it and I got this information, and it turns out if I take this hormone, I put myself at a greater risk for heart disease, and heart disease runs in my family, so I don't want to do that. Um, you know, then we're telling that person, well, you're going to die. You're going to kill yourself because of this. Like, it's so dramatic and it's manipulation, honestly. So I think the conversation really needs to take a different turn. We really need to be prioritizing the health of trans people long term, you know, not just give them this drug and push them off to surgeries. We need to be looking at all the related facts. Hormones are not an isolated thing in our bodies. They're not just something that changes our secondary sexual characteristics and maybe make us more hungry or horny. These are chemicals that drastically affect all of your body, you know, and changing those components is a big deal, especially given we don't have a standard. When they give you, so when they give a female person testosterone, they're checking your levels, right? But they're checking your levels against males. They're not checking your levels against other females who take testosterone, or, you know, females and level of testosterone in natal females who have not taken any cross sex hormones. They're looking at your body, which is effectively completely different than a male body in terms of how hormones work and your endocrine system. And they are comparing that to something else completely different. So there's what's the link here? Why are we doing that? That's misinformation. And we need to have a better standard for that. We need to start looking at it more in terms of, okay, this level of testosterone works in females who are this weight and height and age and have this medical history. Not, okay, you're 22 and we're going to put you on the same amount of testosterone that a 22-year-old man naturally produces, because it doesn't work that way. You know, yeah, our organs are made to produce and process completely differently. So we need to be looking at those differences and not um, discouraging that research just because it might bring up the topic of sex, or it might, possibly discourage someone from going down that path. I mean, if I had seen my doctor and had been told initially, hey, your kidneys are going to fail because you are on too high of a dose of testosterone, and it's going to cause you a lot of health issues down the line, I think I would have reconsidered. Maybe I wouldn't. I can't say for sure, but I at least would have liked to have had the option of having the information. So yeah, that's some of the things, or those are some of the things that I'm interested in learning more about. Again, if you have any interesting studies or research, or if you've seen changes in prescribing doctors where they actually are offering more information, or pushing for a different prescribing process, please let me know, because I would really like to know that that's happening. But right now, I'm looking at what is called aromatization, I believe is how it's said. Um, and that is, again, the conversion of testosterone to estrogen. And this process happens in both females and in males, actually. A lot of research has been done on men who later went on testosterone or testosterone increasing medication to assist with erectile dysfunction or related things that happen as men age. So that's where a lot of the research lies. But again, I have found some data surrounding postmenopausal women as well. So that's some of what I'm looking into. Um, Otherwise, we've got some big projects coming up in the Detrans community, if you want to call it that. I mean, I guess we're a community because we're a bunch of people who had similar experiences. And we usually talk a lot with each other. Um, Sorry, I've seen discourse lately about referring to it as a community because some people are apprehensive about using that word, and I totally get it. So, um, but there are a lot of detransitioners. As far as I know, I think it's only detransitioned women who are involved. So, if there are detransitioned men out there um, who want to get more involved in projects and stuff, like, please hit me up. Let me know because we need your voices too. We definitely need to hear from detransitioned men as well as detransitioned women. So, a lot of detransitioned women are working on some projects right now. Obviously, I can't disclose details because they're still in process, but I'm really excited about these projects. Keep your ear to the ground because things are going to be happening that are going to be, they're going to initiate some big changes, I think. And I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful that detransitioners are represented correctly, um, and that um, we are not met with too much force from the trans community. Um, my hope is that we can be able to provide our stories um, and our experiences and just sort of, shed some light on the fact that sometimes people go back and sometimes bad things happen during transition and, you know, detransitioners are real. um, that's kind of just a general premise that I think a lot of us are trying to convey is just the fact that we're real and we exist out in the world. So I hope that we're um, met with understanding and, like I said too, that we're represented correctly because there have been instances in the past where we've been misrepresented, and that's always so discouraging because you know we don't. I know, at least I don't want to be used as a tool against transgender people or, as a tool against a political party or anything. That's not my ideal. That's not my priority. My priority for myself and what I do is to get more health research done so that we can offer better health care to trans people. But yeah, let's see what else. I think that's about all I really wanted to talk about. I guess one other thing on kind of a more personal note is so I've been really struggling with my mental health over the last few months. My voice is super cracky. I love this. This is great. Just like this is what testosterone does, and then you try to change your voice a little bit to sound a bit closer to what your voice used to be, and this is what happens. Um, I know there's vocal trainings out there. I just haven't done them. So anyway, yeah, my mental health has been really bad over the last couple months. So I've been kind of like in and out of Twitter and doing detrans related work. Like I was talking about the research and stuff. So like there are good days where I like am super into it and totally want to get more involved in things. And there are other days where I'm like, I cannot handle this. Like this stuff needs to be sitting on the back burner and I need to focus more on my mental health. So I appreciate everybody who's kind of like dealt with me sort of like either being crazy active or not active or just kind of dismissing things that are actually going on in the Twitterverse. But one thing that's been a struggle that's popped up has definitely been um, dysphoria. Now, I don't really think about my anxiety around my body as dysphoria. I know that's what it means essentially, but I also feel like that's another word that's kind of been stretched to mean a whole bunch of different things. So I usually just say anxiety around my body or body dysmorphia because, well, I know that's different than, sex related dysphoria. I do have body dysmorphia as well, where I, I have a history of eating disorder, and I look in the mirror and I see things about my body that I consider to be wrong, and they kind of get overinflated, and I can't really recognize myself in the mirror compared to what other people tell me that they see. So I've been dealing with that a lot. My eating disorder resurfaced about a month ago. Um, so I've been dealing with that. This week, I've been getting a little better. I think Christmas helped, like having to eat in front of people, because most of the time, I just kind of spend time on my own. I don't spend a lot of time around people, so I can eat by myself, which means I can have my disordered eating be private, and nobody's there to kind of look, and there's no pressure. Like I gotta make sure I look like I'm eating normally, so nobody asks questions or anything. But that's something I've been dealing with. So yeah, um, I've been really struggling with my sex anxiety again too. Um, I've even been having thoughts like, well, would it have been easier if I stayed on testosterone and just stayed on like a lower dose and just like basically was mostly just socially transitioned still? And I mean, those thoughts kind of are fleeting. When they come into my head, um, it's pretty easy for me to kind of look at them and be like, well, no, because you'd still have the same issues. You'd still have the same mental health issues. You'd still be in the same situation. Um, you would just be dealing with potentially added struggle of going back on a medication that caused you harm, and um, dealing with the social aspect of flipping pronouns again and flipping your name again. Um, but those thoughts do come into my head occasionally, and I don't really talk very often about my sex anxiety or my body dysmorphia or any of that, but they are real things, and they are things that I still struggle with. I do think if I were able to have access to therapy, um, which would require health insurance, which I don't have right now, so keep that in mind. But if I were able to have access to therapy that understood body dysmorphia and gender dysphoria in a way that wasn't related to um, transitioning, but in a way of being able to process those thoughts and process the way that I see my body and the discomfort I have with my body, and really digging into why that discomfort is so prevalent in my life. I think that would help a lot. Unfortunately, as many detransitioners will tell you, it's really difficult to find a comprehensive therapist who is not pushing for you to retransition or pushing issues like that onto you. But yeah, I mean, I'm still like always keeping my eyes out for doctors and therapists who work in I guess a more holistic way, or a more um, critical way, in a good sense, critical, um, instead of affirmation. Um, Obviously, like there are some lovely doctors and therapists out there already that I've been in touch with, and they're fantastic people, and I'm really glad that they're out there as a resource. Um, but like when you're looking for therapy, it's like, okay, are they local? What are the costs? Does health insurance factor in and cover any of it? Do they have time to see me? All these things. So I feel like it's something that would be high in demand, and I really look forward to seeing if more therapists come out with that approach versus what seems to be the standard of, well, you're uncomfortable with your body, so you should just get surgery and take hormones and change it. Um, but yeah. Um, anyway, yeah, I have a lot of discomfort around my body, particularly around my sexual organs and reproductive everything, all that business. I used to have really bad anxiety around my breasts, but not so much anymore. But just in general, like having having days where, you know, it's really hard to take a shower because you're there vulnerable with yourself. And having days where, you want to run away when you're out in public doing the grocery shopping because you hate being seen in different ways. The anxiety is real. Um, and I mean, one of my coping mechanisms is to remember that I can't change how other people perceive me. I can only affect how I perceive myself. Um, and it's hard to not perceive my body in a negative way. But there are certain things that I can recognize about myself as good and as amazing. Like I said at the beginning, um, the human body is fascinating and just such a miracle, honestly. Personally, I am not religious at all, but I do have this sort of uh, wondrous experience when I'm learning more about how the body functions and how different things work. And so that kind of helps me perceive my body in a better light because I think, you know, yes, I have these issues with my sex, and yes, I have these issues with how I'm seen by others. But also look at all these things that my body can do that are astonishing, and these things that it does in no time at all, and it just really interests me, and it makes me appreciate my body a little bit better. So um, I hope that anyone who's struggling with that maybe gives that a try because it's really helped me. So, well, I don't think I have anything else to say. I guess, like I said, comment, especially if you have research information. I'm super into it right now, and I'm actually working on um, piece. It's going to be kind of more of a think piece because, again, I'm not a doctor or a scientist, so I cannot myself conduct studies. I mean, I guess I could go knock on doors during COVID and take a poll, but in general, I can't conduct real research studies. So I'm on the lookout for those, and I'm going to try to write sort of a think piece to put it all together and sort of find the most recent and accurate data to give an understanding as to how cross-sex hormones are metabolized and the possibility of conversion of testosterone and how that might affect people long term, especially female to male transsexuals or transgender people. Yeah, keep me posted, and I hope everyone had a good holiday, and looking forward to the new year. Personally, I think it's going to be just as shitty as 2020, but I'm also very nihilistic, so we'll see. Anyway, I hope you're all well. Take care. Take care of yourself. Drink some water. Yeah. And yeah, good to see you.